There's a specific type of power that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't raise its voice in meetings or pound its fist on tables. It doesn't post motivational quotes or wear expensive suits to prove its worth. This power sits in the corner of the room, watches, listens, and waits. And when it moves, entire empires shift without anyone realizing who pulled the strings. Most people spend their lives trying to be noticed, trying to be the loudest voice, the most confident presence. They believe power comes from being seen. But the truly dangerous ones understand something different. They know that the person everyone underestimates is the person who can move freely, unseen, making calculated decisions while others are distracted by their own noise. This is the story of someone who discovered this truth not through books or mentors, but through the brutal classroom of repeated failure and humiliation. Someone who learned that confidence isn't about convincing others of your worth, but about knowing your own value so deeply that external validation becomes irrelevant. Someone who understood that the greatest weapon isn't the sword you swing, but the one your opponent never sees coming. What you're about to read isn't a fairy tale about overnight success. It's the raw, uncomfortable journey of transformation that happens when a person stops performing for the world and starts playing a different game entirely. A game where patience becomes power, where silence becomes strength, and where being underestimated becomes the ultimate advantage. The world teaches us to be loud, to be visible, to demand attention. But there's another path, one that Machiavelli himself would recognize, the path of the quiet threat. Marcus Chen sat in the corner of the conference room, his laptop open but his attention elsewhere. Around the oval table, 7 other people talked over each other, competing to be heard in the weekly strategy meeting. Sarah from marketing was practically shouting about her campaign idea. David from sales kept interrupting with his numbers. Jennifer, the VP, sat at the head of the table, checking her phone, barely listening to any of them. Nobody looked at Marcus. Nobody asked for his input. In the 3 years he'd worked at Vertex Solutions, he'd become invisible, not because he was quiet by nature, but because every time he spoke, people talked over him. Every time he shared an idea, someone else would repeat it 5 minutes later and get the credit. He'd tried being louder, more assertive, wearing better clothes, using confident body language. None of it worked. He was 31 years old and stuck in a mid-level position while people half as capable climbed past him. The meeting ended like it always did, with Jennifer assigning tasks without consulting anyone about workload or feasibility. Marcus closed his laptop and walked back to his cubicle, a grey fabric box that smelled like old coffee and disappointment. His phone buzzed. A text from his girlfriend, Amanda. "We need to talk tonight." Amanda had been distant for weeks, always finding excuses not to see him, always busy with her friends or her yoga classes or her book club. She was a real estate agent who drove a Mercedes and wore designer clothes. He drove a 10-year-old Honda and bought his shirts from Target. The math wasn't complicated. That evening, Amanda broke up with him at an expensive restaurant she'd chosen. She did it before they ordered, which Marcus appreciated because at least he wouldn't have to pay for a meal he couldn't enjoy. She used all the classic phrases. "It's not you, it's me. I need to focus on myself. You're a great guy," but the truth was simpler, and she finally admitted it after 2 glasses of wine. She'd met someone else, a surgeon, someone successful, someone who had presence and ambition. "You're just so passive, Marcus," she said, and there was pity in her eyes that burned worse than anger would have. "You let people walk all over you, at work, with your friends, even with me. You never stand up for yourself. You never fight for what you want." "I need someone who takes what they want from life." Marcus drove home in silence. He didn't cry. He didn't punch his steering wheel or curse or do any of the dramatic things people did in movies. He just felt empty, like someone had scooped out his insides and left a shell. When he got to his apartment, a 1-bedroom in a building that always smelled like cabbage, he sat on his couch and stared at the wall. His phone buzzed again. His younger brother, Eric. "Hey man, can you lend me $2,000? I'll pay you back next month. I swear." Eric never paid him back. Eric was a bartender who spent money on clothes and clubbing and always had a different girl on his arm. People loved Eric. He was charismatic, charming, always the center of attention. And he treated Marcus like a human ATM machine. Marcus typed back, "Sorry, tight on money right now." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. "Seriously? Come on, bro. I helped you move last year. He'd helped for 30 minutes before leaving to meet friends. Marcus deleted the message and turned off his phone. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying his life like a movie no one wanted to watch. When had it started? When had he become this person that everyone ignored, used, or pitied? He'd been confident once. In college, he'd been the guy with plans, with ideas, with energy, but the real world had beaten it out of him. One rejection at a time, one dismissal at a time, one humiliation at a time. Around 3 in the morning, he got up and opened his laptop. He started searching, not really knowing what he was looking for. How to be more confident. How to get respect. How to stop being a pushover. The articles were all the same. Stand up straight. Make eye contact. Use powerful body language. Speak with authority. He tried all of that. It didn't work. The world saw through it because he didn't believe it himself. Then he found something different. A blog post titled, "Why the Powerful Never Look Powerful." It was written by someone who called themselves The Observer. The writing was different from the usual self-help nonsense. It was sharp, almost cruel in its honesty. People think power is about dominance, the post read. They think it's about being the alpha, the loudest voice, the most aggressive presence. They're wrong. Real power is about control. Control of yourself, control of information, control of timing. The lion that roars might scare the prey, but it's the snake in the grass that makes the kill. Nobody sees the snake. Nobody fears the snake until it's too late. Marcus kept reading. The blog went deep into strategy, psychology, and historical examples. It talked about how the most influential people in history weren't the ones giving speeches, but the advisors whispering in the ears of those giving speeches. It discussed Machiavelli not as a villain, but as a realist who understood human nature. It explained how perception could be weaponized, how silence could be more powerful than words, how letting others underestimate you was an advantage, not a weakness. There were no simple tricks, no 5 easy steps. Instead, it was a philosophy, a way of seeing the world. The weak try to prove their strength. The strong don't need to prove anything. The weak seek validation. The strong validate themselves. The weak react. The strong act with intention. Marcus read until the sun came up. Then he read more. The blog had years of archives, each post dissecting different aspects of power, influence, and control. Some of it made him uncomfortable. It was manipulative, calculating, sometimes dark, but it was also honest in a way nothing else had been. It didn't pretend the world was fair. It didn't promise that being nice would get you anywhere. It simply explained how things actually worked. On Monday, Marcus went to work and did something different. Nothing dramatic. He just stayed quiet. When Sarah from marketing pitched her terrible campaign idea, Marcus didn't offer his feedback like he usually did. He just nodded and took notes. When David from sales asked him to cover his client calls so David could take a long lunch, Marcus said, "I can't. I'm behind on my own work." No explanation, no apology. Just a simple boundary. David looked surprised. "Come on, man. Just this once." "No." Marcus kept his voice flat, emotionless. David stood there for a moment, then walked away muttering something under his breath. Marcus felt a small rush of something he hadn't felt in years. Not satisfaction exactly. More like alignment. Like his actions finally matched some internal truth instead of bending to external pressure. The next day, Jennifer assigned him a project with an impossible deadline. Usually, Marcus would say yes and work weekends to make it happen. Instead, he said, "That timeline isn't realistic. The project needs 3 weeks minimum to be done properly. If you need it in 1 week, the quality will suffer. Which would you prefer?" Jennifer blinked at him. In 3 years, Marcus had never pushed back. "Can you do it in 2 weeks?" "Yes." "Fine, 2 weeks." Sarah, who'd overheard from her cubicle, looked at him with something like respect. Or maybe confusion. Marcus didn't care which. Over the next few weeks, Marcus made small changes. He stopped volunteering for tasks that weren't his responsibility. He stopped responding to Eric's requests for money. He stopped trying to fix other people's problems. At first, people seemed annoyed. His team members acted like he was being difficult. Eric called him selfish. His mother, when he told her he couldn't drive 3 hours to help with her garage sale, said she was disappointed in him. But Marcus noticed something. The more he said no, the more people actually listened when he said yes. The less he explained himself, the less people questioned him. The quieter he became, the more attention people paid when he spoke. One day in a meeting, after listening to 40 minutes of circular debate about a product launch, Marcus spoke up. The problem isn't the marketing strategy or the sales approach. The problem is the product doesn't solve a real problem. We're trying to convince people they need something they don't need. No amount of clever marketing will fix that. The room went quiet. Jennifer looked at him. Go on. Marcus laid out his analysis. He'd been working on it for weeks, watching the numbers, talking to customers, seeing the patterns everyone else ignored. He presented it simply, without emotion, just data and logic. When he finished, Jennifer said, "Why didn't you bring this up before? 3 months ago." Nobody listened. Jennifer's face tightened. She remembered. She'd dismissed him in that meeting without even hearing his full point. "Well, I'm listening now. Put together a full report by Friday." After the meeting, several people came up to Marcus. Some wanted to know more about his analysis. Others seemed nervous, like they'd just realized he'd been paying attention this whole time, cataloging their failures and inefficiencies. Good. Let them be nervous. Marcus went home that night and continued reading the Observer's blog. One post titled "The Illusion of Niceness" stuck with him. "Society tells you to be nice," it read. "Be agreeable. Don't make waves. Go along to get along." But niceness is often cowardice dressed in social acceptability. Real kindness sometimes requires being unkind. Real respect sometimes requires being disrespected first. The world doesn't reward niceness, it rewards value. And sometimes providing value means being the person who says what everyone else is afraid to say. Marcus thought about all the years he'd spent being nice, agreeing with bad ideas to avoid conflict, taking on extra work to be a team player, lending money he couldn't afford to lose, staying in relationships that drained him. What had it gotten him? Nothing but resentment and invisibility. He thought about Amanda's words. "You never fight for what you want." She was right, but not in the way she thought. He hadn't fought because he'd been fighting the wrong battles, trying to prove himself to people whose opinions didn't matter. The real fight was internal. It was about building a foundation so solid that external chaos couldn't shake it. Marcus started a journal that night, not for feelings or therapy, for strategy. He wrote down observations about his coworkers, who had real influence versus who just had a loud voice, who made decisions versus who just executed them, who was actually valuable versus who was just good at appearing valuable. He mapped the power structure of his office like a battlefield. He noticed things he'd never paid attention to before. Jennifer always sided with whoever proposed an idea that made her look good to the CEO. Sarah's marketing campaigns got approved not because they were good, but because she knew how to present them in a way that masked their flaws. David hit his sales numbers by promising clients things the company couldn't deliver, leaving the support team to handle the fallout. The company was a machine, and Marcus had been a cog. Now he was studying the machine itself, learning how it really worked beneath the official org chart and mission statements. One Friday afternoon, Marcus stayed late, not because he had work, but because he wanted to observe the office when people thought no one was watching. He saw Sarah in Jennifer's office, laughing at something, building a relationship. He saw David taking credit for a team member's work in a casual conversation with the CEO who happened to walk by. He saw Jennifer hiding in the conference room, looking stressed, going through numbers that clearly weren't adding up. These people weren't more competent than him. They were just better at playing the game. And now Marcus was learning the rules they'd never bothered to explain, because keeping them secret was part of their advantage. He drove home that night with a clarity he hadn't felt in years. The old Marcus would have been depressed, seeing how politics and manipulation drove success more than merit. The new Marcus, the one being forged in the quiet hours of study and observation, saw opportunity. If the game was political, then he'd become political. If the game was strategic, then he'd become strategic. If the game rewarded the quiet threat over the loud declaration, then he'd become exactly that. His phone buzzed. "Eric. Dude, what's your problem? Mom said you're being weird." Marcus looked at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. That felt good too. Not replying was a form of power. Let Eric wonder. Let his mother wonder. Let everyone who'd taken him for granted wonder why the dependable, predictable Marcus was suddenly unavailable. He opened his laptop and navigated back to the Observer's blog. There was a new post titled The Long Game. Marcus started reading. He had a lot to learn, and for the first time in his life, he was a dedicated student. 3 months passed and Marcus Chen became a different person without anyone noticing the transformation. That was the point. The loud announcement of change was for amateurs. Real change happened in the margins, in the small decisions that accumulated like compound interest. He stopped eating lunch in the cafeteria, where everyone gathered to complain and gossip. Instead, he took walks around the business park, clearing his mind, observing other companies, thinking. People assumed he was being antisocial. He didn't correct them. Let them think what they wanted. He was building something they couldn't see. Every evening, Marcus studied, not random self-help articles, but specific skills. He took an online course in data analysis, another in negotiation. He read books on psychology, body language, and strategic thinking. But more importantly, he studied his environment like a scientist studying an ecosystem. He kept detailed notes on every person in his office, their patterns, their relationships, their weaknesses. Sarah from marketing, for example, was insecure about her job performance. She overcompensated with enthusiasm and aggression in meetings. She needed constant validation. David from sales was lazy but excellent at deflecting blame. He had a network of people who covered for him. Jennifer, the VP, was overwhelmed and desperately trying to hide it from her boss, the CEO. She approved projects based on which ones required the least oversight from her. Marcus didn't judge any of this. Judgment was useless. Understanding was everything. The breakthrough came during a crisis. The company's biggest client, a manufacturing firm that represented 20% of annual revenue, was threatening to leave. Their project was failing. Deadlines had been missed. The product wasn't working as promised. David had made commitments the team couldn't keep. Sarah's marketing materials had overpromised features that didn't exist. The client was furious. Jennifer called an emergency meeting on a Friday afternoon. Everyone who'd worked on the account was there. 12 people crammed into a conference room that smelled like stress and bad coffee. The client had sent a scathing email that Jennifer read aloud, her voice shaking slightly. They were giving the company 2 weeks to fix everything, or they were pulling out and taking their complaints public. We need solutions, Jennifer said. Right now. How do we fix this? Silence. Everyone looked at each other. David started explaining why the delays weren't really his fault. Sarah talked about how the client had unrealistic expectations. The project manager blamed the development team. The developers blamed unclear requirements. It was a circular firing squad, everyone shooting at everyone else. Marcus sat quietly, watching. He'd seen this coming months ago. He'd worked on parts of this project peripherally and had noticed the problems early. He'd mentioned them once in an email that was ignored. After that, he'd simply documented everything, every missed deadline.
Every scope change, every miscommunication.
He had a folder on his laptop with receipts, timestamps, and a clear timeline of how the project had derailed. But he didn't speak. Not yet. He let the chaos continue. He let people exhaust themselves with excuses and blame. He watched Jennifer getting more frustrated, more desperate. After 40 minutes of circular arguments, she snapped. Enough. This is getting us nowhere. If we can't fix this in 2 weeks, we're all going to suffer. The CEO is already asking questions. She looked around the room, and her eyes landed on Marcus. You've been quiet. What do you think? Everyone turned to look at him. Marcus took a slow breath. This was the moment. Not to grandstand or showboat. Not to humiliate anyone. Just to demonstrate value in a way that couldn't be dismissed. I think the project can be saved, Marcus said. His voice was calm, measured. But not by fixing everything. We don't have time for that. We need to triage. Focus on what the client actually needs versus what we promised. Strip away the extras. Deliver a core solution that works. Then rebuild their trust with smaller, incremental improvements. We promised them a full system, David said. We promised them something we can't deliver in 2 weeks, Marcus replied. So we changed the conversation. We give them something that works now and a roadmap for the rest. But it requires honest communication. No more overpromising. Jennifer leaned forward. Can you put together a plan? I already have one. Marcus opened his laptop. He'd spent the last 2 weeks building it, anticipating this exact moment. He projected his screen onto the conference room TV. A detailed analysis appeared. Every promise made to the client. Every deliverable. A priority matrix showing what was critical, what was important, and what was nice to have. A realistic timeline, a communication strategy, everything. The room went silent again, but this time it was different. It was the silence of people realizing they'd underestimated someone. Marcus walked through the plan. He didn't attack anyone. He didn't assign blame. He just presented facts and solutions. When David tried to interrupt with an excuse, Marcus simply continued talking, not raising his voice, just maintaining his momentum until David stopped. When Sarah questioned whether the client would accept a scaled-down approach, Marcus pulled up emails showing the client's actual priorities versus their wish list. He'd done his homework. He had answers for every question. By the end of the presentation, Jennifer was nodding. "This could work. Can you lead the recovery effort?" "Yes, but I need full authority to make decisions without committee approval. We don't have time for meetings." Jennifer hesitated. That was a lot of power to give to someone who'd been invisible 3 months ago. But she was desperate, and Marcus's plan was the only one that made sense. "Fine. You have authority. Report to me daily." Over the next 2 weeks, Marcus worked 18-hour days. But he wasn't just fixing the project. He was building a network. He identified the most competent people on the team and worked closely with them. He cut out the people who created more problems than they solved. He communicated with the client directly, honestly, rebuilding trust through transparency instead of promises. He made sure David was kept out of client communications. He redirected Sarah's energy toward documenting the recovery for future marketing. He gave Jennifer daily updates that made her look good to the CEO. He moved pieces around the board like a chess player, positioning people where they could be useful or where they couldn't cause harm. The client was skeptical at first. They'd heard promises before, but Marcus did something different. He acknowledged every failure directly. "We overpromised and underdelivered. That's on us. Here's what we're going to do to fix it." No corporate speak. No deflection. Just honesty and a clear plan. The client responded to that. They agreed to the revised approach, and when Marcus delivered the core system on schedule, working perfectly, they were surprised. When he delivered the first incremental improvement 3 days early, they were impressed. By the end of the month, they weren't just staying, they were expanding their contract. Jennifer presented the recovery to the CEO as a team effort, but everyone knew who'd actually done it. The CEO, a sharp woman named Catherine Park, asked to meet with Marcus personally. Catherine's office was on the executive floor, a place Marcus had never been. It was all glass and steel and had a view of the city that probably cost more in rent than Marcus's entire salary. Catherine was in her 50s, always impeccably dressed, with a reputation for being brilliant and ruthless. "Sit," she said, not looking up from her computer. Marcus sat and waited. This was a power play. Make him wait. Establish dominance. He understood the game and didn't react. He simply sat comfortably, not fidgeting, not checking his phone, just present. After 2 minutes, Catherine looked up. "Jennifer tells me you saved the Meridian account. I coordinated the recovery, yes? I read your plan. I also read the project history. He saw the problems months ago and nobody listened." "That's correct. Why didn't you push harder?" "Because nobody was ready to hear it. The crisis made them ready." Catherine smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a predator recognizing another predator. "You understand timing." "I'm learning. I've been watching you for the past 3 months. You've changed. You're quieter, more focused. People don't know what to make of you anymore." Marcus didn't respond. "Let her talk." "I like that," Catherine continued. "Too many people in this company are concerned with being liked. You seem concerned with being effective."
Those are different things. They are.
"I'm creating a new position, Director of Strategic Operations. It's a role that would report directly to me, overseeing critical projects and fixing problems before they become disasters. I want someone who sees what others miss. Someone who isn't afraid to make hard decisions. Someone who doesn't need applause. I think that might be you." Marcus felt something shift inside him. This was a major promotion, 3 levels up from where he was. More money than he'd thought possible at this stage of his career. But he didn't smile. He didn't show excitement. He'd learned that showing you wanted something gave other people power over you. "What's the compensation?" he asked. Catherine named a figure that was double his current salary. "I'd want equity as well. Marcus said. If I'm going to be fixing problems at a strategic level, I should have skin in the game. Catherine raised an eyebrow. You're negotiating with me?
You're offering me a job that involves risk and high responsibility.
I'm ensuring the compensation matches that risk. If you want someone who just accepts what they're given, I'm not that person. For a long moment, Catherine just looked at him. Then she laughed. Fair enough. 0.5% equity. Vesting over 4 years. That's my final offer. I accept. They shook hands. Catherine's grip was firm. You start Monday. And, Marcus, don't make me regret this. I won't. Marcus left the executive floor and took the elevator down. When the doors closed and he was alone, he allowed himself a small smile. Not because of the promotion or the money, though those were nice, but because he'd played it perfectly. He hadn't seemed desperate or grateful. He'd negotiated from a position of strength. He'd shown that he understood his value. The news spread through the office within hours. Marcus Chen, the guy nobody noticed, had just become one of the most powerful people in the company. The reactions were predictable. Some people congratulated him, trying to get on his good side. Others pretended they'd always known he was talented. A few, like David and Sarah, were clearly resentful. Marcus didn't care about any of it. He had work to do. His first action as director was to audit every major project in the company. He spent weeks in meetings, reviewing data, asking questions. He didn't announce what he was doing or why. He just observed and documented. People found it unsettling. They were used to new directors coming in with grand visions and immediate changes. Marcus just watched and learned. What he learned was disturbing. The company was inefficient in ways that went beyond normal corporate waste. There were people in senior positions who literally did nothing but attend meetings and send emails. There were projects that had been running for years with no clear purpose or end goal. There were relationships and alliances built on favors and politics rather than performance. Marcus began making changes. Quietly at first, he cancelled the project that was consuming resources without delivering value. When the project lead complained to Jennifer, Marcus provided a data-driven analysis showing the project had no realistic path to profitability. Jennifer, under pressure from Catherine to cut costs, backed Marcus. He reassigned people. Not as punishment, but as strategic placement. He moved competent people into critical roles. He moved incompetent people into positions where they couldn't cause damage. Or in some cases, he built cases for their removal. He did all of this without drama. No angry emails, no public confrontations, just quiet, methodical execution. People started calling him the surgeon behind his back. He cut with precision, and you didn't feel it until it was done. One day, David from sales showed up at Marcus's new office. It was smaller than Catherine's, but still impressive, with a door that closed and everything. David looked nervous. "Hey man, congrats on the promotion," David said. Marcus looked up from his computer. "Thanks. Listen, I wanted to talk about the Meridian project. I know things got messy, but I think my sales approach was solid. The problems were really on the delivery side." Marcus leaned back in his chair. David was trying to rewrite history, to protect his reputation now that Marcus had power. The old Marcus would have let it go, would have nodded and moved on. But that Marcus was gone. "David, I have every email, every call log, every commitment you made to that client. You promised features that didn't exist. You gave deadlines that weren't approved by anyone. You created a situation that was impossible to deliver on. That's not sales. That's fraud, with better branding." David's face went red. "That's not fair. I was just trying to close the deal. By lying to the client and setting up your team to fail, I'm not interested in fair.
I'm interested in accurate. You're a liability.
I'm recommending your territory be reassigned. You can't do that. And I am. You can fight it if you want, but I have documentation of every promise you made versus what was deliverable. Take it to HR. See how that goes for you." David left the office looking like he'd been slapped. Marcus returned to his work. Was it ruthless? Yes. Was it necessary? Absolutely. David had been coasting on charm and shifting blame for years. That ended now. Word of the confrontation spread. People realized Marcus wasn't just another corporate climber playing politics. He had teeth. And he used them on anyone who threatened the company's effectiveness, regardless of their relationships or tenure. But Marcus also showed another side. When a junior developer came to him with an innovative idea for streamlining the client onboarding process, Marcus listened, really listened. He asked questions. He challenged assumptions. And when the idea held up to scrutiny, he gave the developer resources and authority to implement it. When it succeeded, Marcus made sure the developer got public credit in the company newsletter. People noticed that too. Marcus was ruthless with incompetence and protective of talent. He didn't play favorites based on relationships. He based decisions on results and potential. Slowly, the most capable people in the company started gravitating toward him. They wanted to work on his projects. They trusted that he wouldn't waste their time or throw them under the bus. 6 months into his new role, Marcus had built something powerful, not an official team or department, but a network of influence. People across the company who owed him favors, who respected his judgment, who would give him information or support when needed. He'd become a node in the power structure that everyone had to consider in their calculations. His personal life changed too. He moved to a better apartment in a better neighborhood. He bought new clothes, not flashy designer stuff, but quality items that fit well and projected quiet competence. He started going to a gym and hired a trainer. Not because he cared about muscles, but because discipline in one area of life reinforced discipline in others. He got asked out on dates occasionally. Some he accepted, most he declined. He didn't need a relationship to feel complete anymore. He enjoyed his own company. When he did go out with someone, it was because he genuinely wanted to, not because he was afraid of being alone. Eric. He hadn't spoken to his brother in months. Marcus. Hey, long time. What do you want, Eric? Come on, don't be like that. I heard you got some big promotion. That's great, man. Really happy for you. Thanks. So listen, I'm in a bit of a situation. I'm behind on rent, and if I don't come up with $3,000 by Friday, I'm getting evicted. I know we haven't talked much lately, but you're my brother. I need your help. The old Marcus would have said yes, would have drained his savings account, would have enabled Eric's irresponsibility one more time. But that Marcus was dead. No, Marcus said. What? Come on, I'm serious. I'm going to be homeless. You're 34 years old, Eric. You make decent money as a bartender. The fact that you're always broke isn't bad luck. It's bad decisions. You spend money on clothes and clubs and trying to impress people who don't care about you. That's not my problem to solve. Mom was right. You've changed. You've become cold. I've become honest. You don't need money. You need to grow up. When you're ready to do that, call me. Until then, figure it out yourself. Marcus hung up. His phone immediately started buzzing with angry texts. He turned off his phone and felt nothing but relief. Boundaries weren't cruel. They were necessary. And maintaining them was part of respecting yourself. Late that night, Marcus opened his journal and wrote, People confuse kindness with weakness. They confuse boundaries with cruelty. The world respects what you respect. If you don't respect yourself, nobody else will either. The quiet threat isn't about being mean or manipulative. It's about knowing your values so deeply that you don't need external validation. It's about building power through competence, strategy, and unwavering standards. It's about being underestimated by those who don't matter and valued by those who do. He closed the journal and looked out his apartment window at the city lights. Somewhere out there, people were trying to be noticed, trying to be the loudest voice, trying to prove their worth. Let them. Marcus was playing a different game now, and he was winning. 1 year after his promotion, Marcus Chen stood in a hotel ballroom in downtown Chicago, surrounded by 300 people he didn't know and didn't need to impress. The company had been acquired by a larger corporation, and this was the integration celebration. Everyone was networking, trading business cards, trying to position themselves for whatever came next. Marcus stood near the bar, observing. Catherine Park found him there. She looked tired, which was unusual. Catherine never looked tired. Not mingling? She asked. I'm watching, Marcus said, learning who matters in the new structure. Though I should tell you, you already have a reputation with the new leadership. They've heard about you. Good things or bad things? Effective things. Which is better? Catherine ordered a whiskey. Neat. I'm retiring, Marcus. That surprised him, though he didn't show it. When? 6 months. Part of the acquisition deal. I get a nice payout, and I'm tired of corporate politics. I've been doing this for 30 years. It's time. She looked at him. They're going to offer you my job. Marcus processed that. Chief operating officer of a company that was now 3 times larger than Vertex had been. It was the kind of position he couldn't have imagined 3 years ago when he'd sat in that cubicle being ignored by everyone. "Are you going to take it?" Catherine asked. "I don't know yet," Marcus said honestly. "What do you think I should do?" "I think you should be careful. Power is intoxicating, and you've acquired a lot of it very quickly. The person you've become is effective. Maybe even brilliant. But don't lose track of why you wanted power in the first place." "Why did I want it?" Marcus asked, curious about her perspective. "That's something you need to figure out." Catherine finished her drink. "Just remember that being the quiet threat has a cost. People fear you now. Some respect you. But very few actually know you. Make sure that when you look in the mirror, you still recognize the person looking back." She walked away, leaving Marcus alone with his thoughts. Around him, the party continued. People laughed too loud at jokes that weren't funny. They complimented each other with words that meant nothing. They performed the theater of corporate success. Marcus had learned to navigate that theater, but he'd never become a performer himself. His phone buzzed. A text from someone named Rachel. They'd been seeing each other for a few months. She was a lawyer, intelligent and independent, with her own career and her own life. She didn't need Marcus for anything, which was exactly why he enjoyed her company. "How's the boring corporate party?" Marcus smiled and texted back, "Exactly as boring as expected. Leaving in 10 minutes. I'm at your place. Brought wine and takeout." Marcus left the ballroom without saying goodbye to anyone. 3 years ago, that would have seemed rude. Now it just seemed efficient. He didn't owe these people his time or his attention. When he got home, Rachel was on his couch, her shoes off, wearing one of his shirts, looking through something on her laptop. She looked up and smiled. "You're early. Couldn't take it anymore?" It was exactly what I expected. Pointless. Ate Thai food and talked about her case, a complicated corporate lawsuit that she was clearly going to win. Marcus asked good questions, actually listened to her answers. This was different from his relationship with Amanda. He and Rachel had an understanding. They didn't need constant validation from each other. They had their own lives, their own priorities. They came together when it benefited both of them, and there was no pressure beyond that. Later, after Rachel left to prepare for an early morning deposition, Marcus sat in his living room and thought about Catherine's words. Why had he wanted power? Was it revenge against everyone who'd dismissed him? Was it proving something to himself? Or had it become its own purpose? A game he was winning without remembering why he'd started playing. He thought about the person he'd been 3 years ago. Passive, overlooked, desperate for approval. That Marcus had been weak. Yes, but he'd also been kind in ways the current Marcus wasn't. He'd help people without calculating what he'd get in return. He'd trusted easily. He'd been open. The current Marcus trusted no one completely. He calculated every interaction. He maintained relationships based on utility. He'd become effective, powerful, respected. But Catherine was right. Very few people actually knew him, and maybe he'd forgotten how to let them. The next morning, Marcus went into the office early. The acquisition had created chaos. People were worried about layoffs, restructuring, changes to their roles. The new parent company was conducting evaluations of all senior leadership. Marcus had his review scheduled for next week. He spent the morning in meetings, addressing concerns, providing clarity where he could. In the afternoon, he got a message from Jennifer. She wanted to see him privately. Jennifer's office hadn't changed much, though she now reported to someone 3 levels above her, instead of to Catherine directly. She looked stressed when Marcus walked in. "Close the door," she said. Marcus did. "I'm being pushed out," Jennifer said without preamble. "The new leadership wants to bring in their own people. They're offering me a severance package. Are you going to take it? Do I have a choice?" "They've made it clear I'm not welcome." She looked at Marcus with something complicated in her eyes. Resentment, maybe, mixed with exhaustion. "You know what's funny? 3 years ago, I barely knew you existed. Now you're being groomed for the C-suite, and I'm being shown the door." "That's not funny," Marcus said. "No, it's not." Jennifer leaned back in her chair. "Can I ask you something? When did you decide to become this person? The cold, calculating strategist. Was it always there, or did something trigger it?" Marcus considered lying, but decided on honesty. "I got tired of being invisible, of being used. of watching less competent people succeed because they were better at playing politics. So I learned the rules and played the game better than they did. And did it make you happy? That was the question, wasn't it? Marcus looked out Jennifer's window at the city below. It made me effective. Whether that's the same as happy, I'm still figuring out. Jennifer nodded. Advice from someone on their way out? Don't become so good at the game that you forget there's a world outside of it. I spent 20 years climbing this ladder. Know what I have to show for it? A divorce, estranged kids, and a severance package. The company eats people, Marcus. Even the ones who think they're in control. After Jennifer's office, Marcus cancelled his afternoon meetings and went for a walk. He ended up at a coffee shop he'd never been to, in a neighborhood he didn't know. He sat outside and watched people pass by. Regular people. Not executives or strategists or power players. Just people living their lives. Probably struggling with their own problems, their own ambitions, their own transformations. His phone rang. Eric. Marcus almost didn't answer, then decided to, "What's up, Eric?" There was silence on the other end, like Eric hadn't expected him to actually answer. "Hey, I'm calling to apologize." "For what?" "For using you. For always treating you like a bank. For being a shitty brother." Eric's voice was different. Less cocky, more genuine. "I got evicted. Spent a month couch surfing. It sucked. Made me realize some things." "Like what?" "Like you were right. I've been making bad decisions and expecting other people to fix them. That's not fair. I got a second job. I'm paying off my debts. I'm trying to be more responsible." Marcus felt something shift, not pity, but recognition. Eric was going through his own transformation, finding his own version of strength. "That's good, Eric. I'm glad." "Yeah. Anyway, I just wanted to say that. And also, I miss you. We used to be close, you know. Before life got complicated. We did. Maybe we could grab a beer sometime? Just hang out. No money talk, no favors, just brothers." Marcus thought about it. The strategic part of his brain calculated the cost-benefit. Time spent with Eric versus potential complications. But another part, a part he'd been ignoring, just wanted to see his brother. To remember what it felt like to have relationships that weren't transactional. "Yeah," Marcus said. "I'd like that." After the call, Marcus sat there for a long time. He thought about Catherine's question. Why had he wanted power? The answer was becoming clearer. He'd wanted control. Control over his life, his career, his relationships. He'd wanted to never feel helpless or used again. And he'd achieved that. But control and connection were often opposites. The more control he'd gained, the more isolated he'd become. The review with the new leadership happened the following week. 3 executives from the parent company, all sharp and professional, asking questions designed to probe his thinking, his values, his vision for the future. Marcus answered honestly but strategically. He demonstrated his competence without arrogance. He showed his strategic thinking without revealing all his cards. At the end of the meeting, the CEO of the parent company, a man named Richard Chen, no relation, leaned forward. "We've been impressed with what we've learned about you," Richard said. "Your track record speaks for itself. We'd like to offer you the COO position when Catherine retires. It comes with substantial compensation, equity, and influence over the entire operation." "I appreciate that," Marcus said. "Can I have 48 hours to consider it?" The executives exchanged glances. People didn't usually ask for time when offered C-suite positions. "Of course," Richard said. "But can I ask what you need to consider? Whether this is the right move for me? I've learned that taking the next step up the ladder isn't always the right decision. I need to make sure my motivations are correct." Richard smiled. "That's a mature perspective. Take your time." Marcus left the building and drove to a park near his apartment. He sat on a bench and watched kids playing, parents watching, people living ordinary lives filled with ordinary joys and struggles. He called Rachel. "Hey," she answered. "What's up?" "You never called during work hours." "They offered me COO. That's amazing. Congratulations." "I'm not sure I'm going to take it." "Really? Why not?" "Because I'm trying to figure out what I actually want versus what I think I should want." "There's a difference." "There is," Rachel said. "What do you actually want?" Marcus watched a father teaching his daughter to ride a bike. The girl kept falling, and the father kept encouraging her, patient and present. "I want to be effective at what I do. I want to be respected, but I also want to have a life outside of work. I want relationships that aren't strategic. I want to remember how to let people in. Those things aren't mutually exclusive, Rachel said. Aren't they? The person I had to become to get here doesn't have time for vulnerability or connection. The quiet threat doesn't show weakness. Maybe the quiet threat is evolving, Rachel said. Maybe real power is being able to choose vulnerability when it matters, being strategic in business and genuine in personal life. That's harder than just being one thing all the time. After they hung up, Marcus sat there until the sun started setting. He thought about everything that had led him here. The humiliation in meetings, Amanda's rejection, his brother's manipulation, the blog that had started his transformation, the strategic choices that had built his power, the isolation that had come with it. The old Marcus had been weak but connected. The current Marcus was strong but alone. Maybe there was a third version. Someone who maintained boundaries and standards while still being capable of genuine connection. Someone who was strategic in professional life but authentic in personal life. Someone who understood power but chose when and how to use it. He thought about what Catherine had said, make sure you recognize the person in the mirror. Marcus had been so focused on not being the person everyone walked over that he'd built walls everywhere. Some of those walls were necessary, but not all of them. The next day, Marcus called Richard and accepted the COO position with one condition. He wanted clear boundaries between work and personal time. He would be available for genuine emergencies, but he wasn't going to be the executive who lived in the office and sacrificed everything for the company. Richard agreed, though he seemed surprised. Marcus then did something he hadn't done in years. He reached out to people not for strategic reasons, but because he genuinely wanted to. He called Eric and scheduled that beer. He asked Rachel to dinner, a real date, not just casual convenience. He even reached out to a few former colleagues he'd lost touch with, people who'd been kind to him back when he was invisible. Some relationships couldn't be rebuilt. Amanda had moved on, married her surgeon. David from sales was working at a competitor and seemed bitter. Sarah from marketing avoided him at industry events. That was fine. Not everyone needed to be part of his life. But some connections surprised him. The junior developer whose idea he'd supported was now leading an entire team and was genuinely grateful for the opportunity Marcus had given him. A former mentor from his early career was happy to hear from him and offered wisdom about maintaining balance in leadership roles. Even his mother, after an honest conversation about boundaries and respect, started treating him differently. The transformation wasn't complete. Marcus still calculated. He still observed. He still maintained boundaries and standards. But he also learned to turn it off sometimes, to be present, to let people see the human underneath the strategy. At his first company-wide meeting as COO, Marcus did something unexpected. After presenting the strategic vision and operational plans, he talked about culture. Not corporate buzzwords about synergy and excellence, but real talk about treating people as humans, not resources, about the difference between being demanding and being cruel, about how effectiveness and empathy weren't opposites. Some of the old guard executives looked uncomfortable. This wasn't the typical COO speech, but Marcus saw others nodding, especially younger employees who were tired of the dehumanizing grind of corporate culture. I spent years being overlooked, Marcus said, and then I spent time becoming someone who couldn't be overlooked. In that process, I learned some hard truths about power and influence. But the hardest truth was this: you can win every battle and still lose the war if you forget why you're fighting. We're here to build something meaningful, not just to play political games. Anyone not interested in that isn't a good fit for this organization. After the meeting, several people approached him. Some wanted to work directly with him. Others just wanted to thank him for saying what they'd been thinking. Marcus listened to each of them, really listened, the way he'd learned to before his transformation had turned every interaction into calculation. One evening, 6 months into his new role, Marcus stood in front of his bathroom mirror getting ready for a dinner party Rachel was hosting. He looked at himself. Really looked. The clothes were better. The fitness showed. The eyes were sharper. But there was also something else. A little less hardness. A little more openness. Catherine's question echoed in his mind. Did he still recognize the person in the mirror? Yes. But it was a synthesis now. The weakness of his past was gone, but so was some of the coldness that had replaced it. He was strategic but not heartless, boundaried but not closed off, powerful but not isolated. The quiet threat had learned something unexpected. The ultimate power wasn't in being invulnerable. It was in being strong enough to choose vulnerability with the right people. His phone buzzed. Rachel texting that guests were arriving. Marcus smiled genuinely this time and headed out. It worked late 3 nights that week, but tonight was about connection, not strategy, about being present, not calculating, about remembering that power was a tool, not an identity. Walking to his car, Marcus thought about the blog post that had started everything. The Observer's words about snakes in the grass, about power that doesn't announce itself, about the advantage of being underestimated. All of that was still true. But he'd learned something the Observer hadn't written about. The quiet threat wasn't just about power and strategy. It was about having the strength to be underestimated when it served you, and the confidence to be fully seen when it mattered. It was about control, yes, but also about choosing when to surrender that control to genuine human connection. 3 years ago, Marcus had been invisible and powerless. Then he'd become powerful and isolated. Now, finally, he was becoming integrated, strong and connected, strategic and genuine. A person who understood power but also understood its limitations. As he drove through the city night, Marcus realized something. The transformation wasn't finished. It would never be finished. Growth wasn't a destination, but a process. He would keep evolving, keep learning, keep balancing the competing demands of effectiveness and authenticity. But one thing was certain. He would never go back to being the person everyone ignored. That version of Marcus was gone forever. And the person who'd replaced him, for all his complexity and contradictions, was someone Marcus could respect when he looked in the mirror. That, more than any title or salary or measure of power, was the real victory. Not just building strength, but building a version of strength that didn't require the destruction of everything soft and human in himself. The quiet threat had learned to roar when necessary. But more importantly, he'd learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is lower your guard with someone who's earned it. And that was something Machiavelli never wrote about, but would have respected, because the ultimate strategy wasn't just understanding how to gain power, it was understanding when and how to share it with the people who mattered. Marcus smiled as he pulled into Rachel's driveway, ready for an evening of genuine connection with people he'd chosen to let past his walls. The game continued. But now he was playing for something that mattered beyond winning. He was playing for a life worth living.